Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Outskirts Podcast with Tanner and friends. I just wrapped up a really interesting interview with Chester Moore of the Dark Outdoors podcast. He's also a YouTuber and an author, and he travels and speaks on subjects to do with dangers you encounter in the outdoors. He also delves a little bit into the supernatural. Let's see, what did we talk about? Well, I guess you'll just have to tune in and find out. Look for another spooky release, maybe on Halloween. It will be in the first-person storyteller style. I guess that's it. Cheers, friends.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I was just going through some of your videos. Um, some cool stuff, man. You do a lot of traveling, so that's got to be a lot of fun.
I'm very blessed. I get to do some really interesting stuff, and
Yeah,
it's getting more interesting. I've got some things happening that are really cool. I think that'll for 2025.
awesome. Would you mind just kind of introducing yourself and just give a quick little about me,
Yep.
and then we.
Let me do my obligatory make sure the cell phone's turned off.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. All right, thanks. All right.
All right. Hi, my name is Chester Moore, and I am a wildlife journalist and investigator. So I make my living writing, broadcasting, speaking, investigating about wildlife. But I also have a deep interest in things like true crime and the great outdoors. And so that makes for a really interesting mix of media stuff I do through like my Dark Outdoors podcast platform and other stuff that I do. And I guess for this spooky time of year, it definitely makes some interesting conversations.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Chester. Um, I think I first heard you on William Ramsey. You've done you've
Wow,
done
cool.
you've done William Ramsey Investigates, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's where I found you. You did a really good interview there, and I, he does a lot of kind of true crime. Well, he's kind of all over the place. He does like parapolitical, true
Yeah, he's
crime,
all over the
supernatural.
place in a different way that I'm all over the place. So like I have my all over the place, and then you got William Ramsey's all over the place, and we kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah,
He's a great guy.
yeah, he is pretty great. I've enjoyed his work. I've been enjoying yours too, just listening to your back catalog
Hmm.
on the podcast, and then you've got a YouTube channel that got a lot of cool videos there. I was just watching one you did where somebody asked you, "How would you kill Jason?"
Yeah.
How would you kill Jason? I've been thinking about it for the last 10 minutes. Like, how would you kill Jason? You said you call in an air raid or something on him, right?
Well, there's two versions. I have to be very clear about this for Friday
Okay.
the 13th purist. Before part 6, so the Jason from 1 through 4 was like a really wounded by part 4 messed up guy, but he was a human. After part 6, he was basically a zombie. So, you know, zombie Jason airstrike. All right. Zombie Jason, you're gonna take some old school hunting stuff, find a trail, set up with a sniper rifle, get in the climbing tree stand, get way up for safety purposes, and hope you make a good shot.
I like that. I agree with that totally. I was thinking like molten lava. Like you got to melt zombie Jason, you know? Like you're saying post episode 6. I was thinking about oh, how they killed the dragon and um the Hobbit movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they like melt all the gold down and he got swallowed up? But you
Well,
still,
it's probably at that level,
yeah.
after the rising from the grave and the being able to survive Lara Park Lincoln's awesome Tina character in part 7, the telekinetic girl.
That's
You might
right.
want to just do something to make sure it's just ashes and then send those ashes into space or something.
Yeah, or put him in some kind of blessed urn. It seems like a spiritual battle at that point, right? You
I
know?
just invoke the name of Jesus to get out of here and you're gone, pal. That's probably my best option if burning him didn't work, you know.
I hear you. Yeah.
The deep conversations we have on podcasts.
Yeah. Well, we find ways to have fun and also
Absolutely, man.
talk about things that are meaningful. Um,
Absolutely. It's
that's
fun.
fun. Yeah, so I'm putting together now last minute my Halloween series, and
Hmm.
I really appreciate you making time for me to come and
No,
share
man,
some
it's an honor to be
stories.
on, brother. I appreciate you reaching out. And you said you connected via William Ramsey show. That's really cool because that's kind of the part of my work that connects well with this time of year.
Yeah. There's a question that I'm dying to ask you, but I'm going to save it for later.
Okay.
If can we just start off, if you've got some stories in mind that you think would be appropriate for the spooky season, um, I'm just going to turn you loose on it, and then
Okay.
we do a little Q&A afterwards.
Okay.
All right.
I've got several different levels of spooky season. So I'm gonna when I before I well before pretty early into my career, before I ever conceptualized my Dark Outdoors podcast, um, I was in the mountains of Northern California with my dad, and we were up on this mountain. We had been told would be a good area to listen for strange vocalizations, and that the elk were rutting, and we would have a beautiful chorus of elk all night. And I had new night vision goggles, so we got on top of this mountain. We were told, we get to the mountain, the very top, there's a road, there's a logging road, and one went left, one went right, and go to the left side. And there's like a little valley. And so we went over there, overlooking the valley. We get there, darkness falls. It's really creepy. First time I'd ever been in the Pacific Northwest at night, and it's dark under those big trees, right? And I'm looking through my night vision goggles as I hear elk in the distance, and I'm hoping something else sounds out. And then I see a light beam. And I go, Dad, there's somebody down there with the light. Now, I had known that there was a pretty good amount of drug trafficking in that part of the world. But there's drug trafficking in the woods here in East Texas as well, you know? And my dad goes, I don't see a light. And I took my goggles off. I don't see a light either. Put them back on. Now the light is shining like right up this way, going like toward down the road. And I'm going, Dad, there's somebody with a light down there. And he goes, I don't see a light. I took my goggles off and I go, oh my God, I don't either. And it clicked. Someone down there had night vision goggles on, and they had an infrared light that could only be seen through infrared.
Oh,
And I'm going, they're not waiting for creepy cryptids or elk to call out. That's drug stuff. So we immediately just grabbed a little rental, and we took all of our camp we were going to camp out with and just threw it in there real quick. And as soon as I turned the lights on the other side of that logging road, we could have taken to the right, lights turn on. And we're going down the road, and they're coming down the road. And I knew someone had been signaled. I just knew it in my gut. And we get to the road, thank God, about 5 seconds before they did. And I'm going down that mountain road, and they're up behind me. And like, I've never driven in mountains until this trip. I was very, young in my career and stuff. And there are like little lanes on the mountain where you can pass people. They swerved over into that lane and trying to push me off the mountain.
oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm like, I guarantee you, wherever this rental vehicle ended up, my fingerprints are ingrained in the steering wheel, right? And we're getting down to the bottom of that mountain, and it was a pretty good haul down there. And we were literally, it's on a highway, but this highway is 25 miles from the nearest town, one direction, and probably about 40 the next. So I turned off to go back where we were staying, and thank God they turned back the other direction. But I called the Forest Service the next morning, and they said, oh, you're lucky you're alive. And I said, what? Oh, that was absolutely drug runners. It's a very bad area for that. I said, look, pal, you have an elk crossing sign on the flipping highway. Can you put danger, drug activity?
I guess, yeah.
So this story goes a lot deeper. So 5 years ago, I find myself at the National Wild Turkey Federation conference in Nashville. And I meet a U.S. Forest Service game warden. And I'd never met a Forest Service game warden. I didn't quite know what they did. I met U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Texas Parks and Wildlife. He said, well, mainly we deal with illegal timber harvest, but also wildlife issues. And he goes, I just retired from Humboldt County, California. And that's where my incident happened. And I told him, and his face gets like stone, like serious. He goes, you're lucky you're alive. He goes, when you go home, you go watch Murder Mountain on Netflix. I said, what? He goes, don't. He goes, you write it down, Murder Mountain. And I went and found where I was on the map. There's an actual place they've called Murder Mountain because of all the people that have been dead and disappeared in this area. I was like 5 miles away from the actual Murder Mountain, but in the area that has the most missing people in North America per capita. And it was so that kind of got me later. That kind of got me thinking about making some kind of media platform out of that. So that. People have asked me, what is the most dangerous thing that you've ever encountered in the woods? I said, people. Yeah. Absolutely, people. And so that one was pretty intense. That was a personal encounter. That was a pretty wild situation.
Wow. How old were
Uh,
you when you and your dad went out there?
Mid-20s, maybe 22, maybe I might have been 24, 25.
I guess what I'm trying to get, how long ago was this? That's
That
what I
was
really
about
want to
20
know.
years ago.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so wow, that's like early 2000s.
Yeah.
All that's going on out there.
Yeah, because I went to go do a cage dive with great white sharks in San Francisco.
What?
And my dad went with me, but he didn't go cage diving. He stayed in the hotel, but we wanted to go up and see the Bluff Creek, Willow Creek area, and we wanted to go up and see the redwoods and all that, while we were there. And we ended up running into drug runners and having a wild story, but it produced the great Dark Outdoors media platform. So it didn't seem like a good trade-off back then. Even if I'd have known, I was pretty dang scared.
Yeah, the people are scarier than the great whites. Huh.
Yep.
Uh, that reminded me of an episode of, I think it was Unsolved Mysteries. They got the new season on
Yeah.
Netflix. They had an episode where they were like, there's a group of maybe 20 something disabled men, like
Yeah.
highly functioning,
Yeah.
maybe on the spectrum or something. And they had gone to this, and this is up there in Northern California. I'm wondering if it was Murder Mountain, but
I've
it's
heard of a story that involved several men that went to like an event and disappeared.
that's right.
And
They totally disappeared. They found their
yeah,
car
I
and their
actually looked
shoes.
when I first started doing Dark Outdoors. I was looking at old cases of stuff, and I looked briefly at that one. Yeah, there's weird stuff up there, but you don't have to go, all the way over there to encounter that kind of stuff. I mean, I found a meth lab here, not too far from me a few years back, and I talked about that on my show. So that's a danger, and some guy called my radio show and goes, "Did you verify that it was a meth lab?" Yeah, I went and knocked at the flipping door. That makes sense. It was either a meth lab or it was Jason Shack from Friday the 13th Part 2. And I don't want to meet either one of them, And
Yeah.
it looked a lot like Jason Shack. That was the creepy part, I was like, oh boy, maybe I stepped into some kind of weird space-time continuum of a fictional movie becoming reality because I watched it too much, But funny story about that was on that, I'm talking about creepy stuff, long time ago. There's that area that I'm talking about. There's like 3 major ways to kind of get there from where I'm at. And we went one time the real country way to get there a long time ago. And we come to this little tiny community about 15 miles away from this location. And I'm at a little 4-way stop sign, the only one I think in that area. And I look, my cousin was with me and he was like 15 at the time. And there's a dude on the porch in overalls with a paper bag over his head with eyes cut out and a mouth cut out.
That's horrifying.
Rocking in a rocking chair. And I'm going, this ain't good. and I look over and I'm like, my cousin goes, dude, it's not even like Halloween. It's like
I was just gonna ask.
I'm like, oh my God. And it's rocking. It's a real person, So on the way back that day, we came back through the same spot, and it was only a couple hours later, and the dude was there. But this time, the head turned and looked at us.
Oh my God.
And I'm going, who is in like June in Texas outside the middle of the day in overalls with a brown paper sack mask on, looking at cars driving by and what's under the mask? So that's someone else that could have been in that dang shack. So I don't want to do with any of them, right?
That's scary. Yeah. I mean, you just gave me an idea for how I'm going to scare kids. I got this haunted garage stall and I have a rocking chair I sit in.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was going to be the show. I'm just going to do the overall paper sack thing.
It's creepy.
That is creepy, man.
It is. We used to do Michael Myers. I used to put the Michael Myers get up on, and we wouldn't scare little kids, but we would scare like the teens, all the teens and preteens, and it was so funny. But those are just a couple of, encounters, things that have happened over the years, personally, on a personal level to me,
Yeah.
But I've also investigated and had some pretty wild stories. You like to hear a couple of those?
Please. Yes.
All right. So I got a recent one that is just, it's like my current thing. That's like my obsession on this. So Lyle Blackburn is a great cryptozoological researcher and author, and he's also in the band Ghoultown and Solitude Aeternus, and really good friend of mine. And we were at an event earlier this year in Falk, Arkansas, and at the Falk Monster Festival. And he goes, "Do you remember Rob Riggs?" And Rob was an author of a book called On the Trail of the Wild Man. It was about Bigfoot and different lore in the Big Thicket region of Texas. I said, "Yeah, Rob was actually a friend of mine," and I talked to him like a year before he died. Rob had got cancer and passed away, and I had a visit with him about a year, maybe 8 months before he died. He goes, "Do you remember him talking about the potential of like a lost tribe surviving like in the Big Thicket or somewhere down there?" I said, "I do remember that." He goes, "Well, I had someone talk about hearing this like war cry in the Big Thicket." I thought that was interesting. So I went back and I hadn't read Rob's book in years, and I got it out of my archives. And he has all these reports and with names and everything of like the lower Trinity River Basin around the Old and Lost River of people saying like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that they ran into, quote, Indians, like with like a loincloth.
What?
And incidents of people getting shot at with like primitive arrows. And there's another one up in the Big Thicket region where someone was going down this bayou through there, and they came across, they said was a, quote, Indian, and he looked angry at them, and he had primitive weaponry and stuff and looked like a primitive guy. And I was like, whoa. Well, I released the Dark Outdoors episode about that, and I had someone message me that their father was the sheriff in the 70s in the main area those reports had come from, and he had his own story. So if anyone listening out there has a tale in the Big Thicket, East Texas, down by Trinity Bay, those kind of areas of any kind of tribal contact or finding any like, primitive weaponry that looks, like it might have been made in modern times, please contact me. It's an interesting story, and it's wild. And I actually think there's something to it. I don't know about now, but 40 years ago, possibly. And even now, a lot of that area isn't really developed and messed with. So anyway, it's just one of those things. I mean, it's run into like some kind of cryptid thing is one thing. But bro, if you walked out into an area, you saw a bunch of 6.5 foot tall dudes, probably really tall like Karenka was, in a loincloth with flint arrows pointing at you. That would be scary.
Wild. Yeah, that would be horrifying.
That's like, so Lyle is really on it and I'm really on it. It's just something I'm looking for reports. And that's kind of just a really interesting one that is out there. I'm working on something. One of the most interesting things to me is the case of the Phantom Killer of Texarkana.
Okay. I don't know about that.
Known as the Moonlight Murders. Made famous by the 1976 Charles B. Pierce film, The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
Oh, yeah.
And it was unsolved Lover's Lane murders in 1946. And the guy wore the white hood, which is absolutely where they got the idea for Jason in part 2 of the movie, because it came out, Town That Dreaded Sundown came out like 4 years before Friday the 13th part 2. It was a pretty big hit at the drive-in and stuff like that. But this was unsolved murders. And, it was in Lover's Lanes. It was on dirt roads. It was in like remote city park areas. And I started studying that. And what I found is that there are an unbelievable amount of murders, abductions, things that happened just past the city. Like, I think people either think one of two ways. They think the city's safe, or they think the city is terrifying, or they think the deep, remote forest in the Rockies and Smokies are safe. But nobody ever thinks about like that intermediate area. And there's a lot of death, a lot of murder and stuff. And I think this Phantom Killer created a legacy of a pattern of killing and a pattern of terrorizing people that happened in 1946. He was never caught. They think they caught the guy that did it on other charges, but he never admitted it. But there's a couple of things. So I have a really interesting show. And my guests, I have two guests on that. Pamela Pierce, the daughter of the director of the movie that was about the real killings. And I have John Tennyson, who is a clinical psychiatrist and doctor. And he believes he is the first cousin once removed of who he thinks is actually the killer. And we have a clip of a lady he was interviewing for something about Texarkana that lived back then, and he wasn't even talking to her about the Phantom killings. And she said she wanted to confess something. And she confessed when she was a little girl, a man in a white hood was standing at her window when she went to bed one night, looking at her. And her mom came in and saw it and went and shut like the curtain and like ran out and, had a big reaction to it. And it was the only other person living, because one person saw the hood. It would have been the only other person to see the hood. But I really believe this Phantom person, because it was a gigantic news story, huge. It was on like Life magazine, which was in the millions back then, radio, all these major newspapers. It was really like, it was like a Jack the Ripper thing hits America in a way, as far as and this guy absolutely influenced Zodiac Killer.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing. Zodiac used a 22 caliber. This guy used a 22 caliber. Zodiac had a hood. This guy had a hood. So, there's a legacy. I'm writing a book called Phantom Legacy that'll be out next year. And it's going to be about this and raising awareness to being safe in these areas. So we kind of feel, we're not grizzlies out here, and we're not down in the inner city. So it's going to be okay, right? We're just 5 miles out of the city, and there's these beautiful hiking hills. And those end up being the most dangerous areas in a lot of times. So, so we're going to be talking about a lot of those strange cases and stuff and that. And there's a guy that'll be in the book named Edward Wayne Edwards. I believe Edward Wayne Edwards is the Zodiac Killer. Okay. There's a book written about it called It Was Always Me, The Many Murders of Edward Wayne Edwards, right? And it was a Paramount series. It's very controversial because the author, who's a brilliant researcher, went off and blamed him for like everything that happened in the crime. But I don't think Edward Wayne Edwards died in prison. He's the only Zodiac suspect who actually was killing on Lover's Lanes. He was convicted of 4 Lover's Lane murders. And he wrote a book and was touring the country telling the world that he was a reformed criminal, because he was on the FBI's most wanted list in 1960. And what he was on the FBI's most wanted list in 1964 was escaping jail after being the number one suspect when they found him at a murder scene of a Lover's Lane murder. I mean, it's a wild story. But if they get him, if they ever pin it on him, they'd have to open up the Atlanta child murders, because he was in Atlanta at the time. A lot of crazy stuff. So I don't think they'll ever pin Zodiac. They'll find somebody else that was Zodiac, But he'll be a little bit in the book, because even the killings that this guy did that were like his ones he's like convicted for, ring back to that Phantom. It's really wild stuff, and I wasn't researching this for like a project. I was just looking into a couple different things. And I'm like, hey, there's some connective tissue here, Yeah. And I'll tell you a funny story, since it's Halloween. We got to have a little fun here.
Yeah.
So me and my girlfriend did what red-blooded American couples used to do back in the day. And we went parking, all right, at this little spot I'd found in kind of one of these kind of areas, right? At 17 years old, my number one priority is not thinking about public safety, right?
Right.
So me and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, so this is okay. We pulled up to a spot, and I kid you not, bro, I just undid my seatbelt, and she undid her seatbelt. I reached over to kiss her, and I hear loud knocking on the window.
Oh, man.
Dude. So I had just seen that movie like 6 months earlier, and in my mind, it's the freaking Phantom, right? Mm-hmm. I'm dead, and it's a cop, right? And I go, oh my God, it might not be a real cop. My paranoid journalistic mind already as a teenager. And I rolled down my window and I said, yes, sir. He got to laugh. He goes, can you guys go talk somewhere else? Isn't it real safe there? Yes, sir. So he killed the mood. We went home. But that was a funny little, having that impacts you. When I interviewed Pamela Pierce, whose dad was the director, she had the same story, but it was closer to like the actual movie coming out. He goes, just should have been the girl whose dad made the movie, And she talks about her and her now husband go up somewhere in some dark road around Texarkana at that, and then a car pulls up behind them, So, be careful if you're making out there in the middle of the woods. Watch some slasher movies and get schooled on what may happen,
It's so interesting that was the comment that's what's on the cop's mind. He's like, you're not necessarily safe out here.
That's what he told me.
You
he
think you're
me.
alone, but you might not be.
He told me. You could tell he was a good dude because when I cracked that window, he just had a smirk and he's an older cop laugh on his face. He goes, "Oh man."
Yeah.
He's like, "You guys go talk somewhere else. It ain't safe out here,"
Yeah.
And so we did, and I was just glad it wasn't like Zodiac Returns or something,
Of course, yeah. And then who's the other guy out in the Bronx? The Lover's Lane killer.
Well, there was
Son of Sam.
David Berkowitz, Son of
Yeah.
Sam.
Well,
There's a lot of that, and it's not just the Lover's Lane because actually, the Phantom killed someone in their home in a farm area out in that area. But it's taking a place people go for recreation and peace and terrorizing it.
Yeah.
And it becomes a news thing. And what scares me now is this guy was obviously hearing his stuff on the radio and newspapers. Everybody talked about it. Now they can watch real-time response.
Oh, yeah.
And we're seeing that actually. People post atrocities, so like that. And so it's an interesting journey of investigation. It's kind of made me look at some of these outdoors areas differently. And I'm not someone that's like, oh man, I have the Jeffrey Dahmer trading card. No, I'm not into that. I want people to be safe, and I'm not trying to lift up serial killers as some kind of hero. And I want to make people think in a productive way about it. And, bring the creep factor in too. That's fun. But make people think about safety and taking care of themselves, stuff like that.
Yeah. I did listen to, because I'm so close. You did an episode on a national forest that's just north of me, Sam Houston.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, that's my number 2 downloaded episode right there.
Is it really?
Yeah, my number 2 downloaded episode is the Big Sam episode.
And so it's like these hunting grounds that are just outside of major metro areas.
Yeah.
Where you have a lot of people venturing in, weekenders or day hikers. Yeah, it made sense to me.
Well, what's interesting about that episode is how I got there, like how that came to the forefront. And it started off talking to a game warden. And again, I was at an awards banquet thing, and this game warden, I always ask game wardens, hey, you got any crazy run-ins with people in the outdoors I could talk to you about, or dark outdoors?
Yeah.
He looks at me and he goes, you mean like all the missing people around Sam Houston National Forest? That was his answer. And I ended up talking to a lady named Jerry Dean, Missing Persons of America. And she has a website called the Missing Texas 40 and a social media presence. And I hate to say this, I'm not sure if she's still with us. She was dealing with cancer battle and kind of went offline, I kind of lost touch with her. So I hope she's okay. And she had someone doing mapping for her of where all these people, and what she wanted to do was create a platform. When the police stopped looking for people, she kept the word out about the cases, right?
Yeah.
And somebody doing maps, she's like, Jerry, you have to look at this. There are 2 counties that bump together, and they're part of the Sam Houston National Forest. There's 40 missing people. And that was like 5 times as many missing people per capita as it should have been. It was unbelievable. And so we started looking into that and talking to people, and just crazy. I just talked to someone last weekend about some stuff that happened in there. I mean, there have been verified human trafficking elements in there.
Yeah.
There's, been some other murders, a lot of missing people around the corridor of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the places that I don't stop. I don't go there. I have no reason to go in there.
Yeah.
And the men, and especially outdoors, go, I'm not worried about it. Boy, I'm going to bring my shotgun. We're going to be okay. I don't want to have to use the shotgun. If I have to, that's great. But I'm not going to go into the layer of, whatever, just in case, So I'm trying to use common sense. But that one is a weird area. I even have a weird story about a guy I know this guy pretty well. And he went deer hunting in there. And he's coming out of where he was hunting, and he sees this gigantic buck on the high line right away. There's all these high line or fire breaks, one of the two, along. And so he gets down, boom, shoots the deer, doesn't move. He goes, there's no way that deer did not move. So he goes, I'm going to light it up again. Boom! Deer don't move. All of a sudden, here's flashing lights and stuff. Game wardens had set up a deer on the edge
Decoy?
as a decoy for poachers, but it was weird because it was in the middle of the day. They usually do those at night to get night poachers, and it's perfectly legal for someone to kill one on that highline right away unless they're on the road. But it was close enough to the road they could have shot. So they must have been dealing with some kind of road shootings during deer season. But he said they were freaking out because they were expecting a shot from the road. Here comes a shot from the backside, which they should have thought about because it's hunting season, you know. Yeah. Well, just a lot of strange stuff happens in there, you know.
Yeah, what does that tell you? If it's such a problem that they're looking for poachers during the day, during deer season.
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
Who's doing the poaching? Is it like what?
Well, I have a whole episode about a really weird poaching trend I've been investigating for almost 7 years now, and I don't think this is linked to it, but there's a big poaching problem, and who knows? It's the idea of how many criminal elements are drawn there from drugs, trafficking, poaching elements, stuff like that. And my opinion is it's really close to I-45. You got interstate corridor, and Conroe is a pretty good sized city. It's right there close to Conroe. It goes up further. You've got Houston, basically an hour away. So it's a really easy playground to escape into for people into dark stuff. And there were, leave this little minor detail out, there were decapitation lines set on the bike trails.
In Sam Houston.
And with razor wire.
What?
Yeah, I got the pictures of it. Yes.
I mountain bike in the woods. Not there, but yeah, that's awful.
Don't there, because they had to, somebody on the hiking and biking group that I was a member of posted the pictures they took. They were coming. They had a GoPro on, and they saw something glisten right before they went. So they just kind of stopped, and they looked. They're this far from a razor wire, and there were multiple razor wires set at head level on the biking trails.
That's horrifying. I mean, what is that? Who does that?
That's what gets me. You got to ask the question. Obviously, there's probably no link with the human trafficking and maybe some of the drug people and the poachers. But when you get into things like decapitation lines, missing people, other things, people talked about getting stalked. Is there an element there that's the same person or same persons that are involved and kind of targeting that area? And that's the question I'm sort of asking. So an early Dark Outdoors show was about these weird horse killings that were happening. And I normally don't like reporting on horse killings. I'm a wildlife guy and I do true crime in the outdoors, but this struck me as so bizarre. And a newspaper report came out in 2020 where there were 5 horses killed in Pearland, okay, which that's Houston, folks. That's Houston with a little more shrubbery, okay, and there were these. I ended up talking to one of the people who lived next to the last one I got killed. There were 5 big ranchettes. Someone was going in there and they were getting the horses out, killing the horse, cutting the meat away, and hauling the meat off. Now, obviously, there's someone wanting to eat horse meat.
Yeah, that's what it's.
But my question is this: as a journalist, there are horses all around remote areas someone could get to that no one would know was dead for a week. These were shot in killed in backyards and stuff. Why would someone go to that length to commit that crime unless someone wanted someone's pet to eat? Does that make any sense? Like it was a fetish thing or something bizarre. Well, I looked at that deal, and then I found in Liberty, I don't know if you know where Liberty is.
Yeah, it's north.
That a little girl in 2018 had a horse killed in her yard. It was shot dead and left away. A week later, another little girl down the same road had a horse killed. Then on Valentine's Day, I believe it was 2019, a horse rescue had reached out to the family of the first little girl and gave her a new horse. That night, it was shot and left to lay. And the officials and the police department would not respond to my calls or emails. They would not respond to any of my contact. But in their official statement on the killing of the Valentine's Day killing, they said we're concerned someone is practicing on horses to target humans. That's right close to the Sam Houston stuff, by the way. Now, I ended up on Facebook, wrote an article about how is it possible there's a horse serial killer that is a deranged person for whatever reason is going out shooting people's pets to lash out at people. And 2 nights later on my Facebook, someone posted a picture of a dead horse with a bullet wound. And it was in Port Mansfield, which is down in South Texas. And someone's horse had been shot and left away. And I noticed the pattern. They were all teen to preteen girls that rode horses and were on social media profiles as horse riders for competitions. All of them. And then I found 2 more between Port Mansfield off of 77 and San Antonio that were the same exact profiles.
That's so bizarre.
Weird
Your mind just
stuff.
wanders. Yeah, you can just
it's like
try
so
to profile
weird.
this guy. Yeah, that's so bizarre.
And it's the same. And there's horse killings all around America right now. It's been going on. It's really weird. But the Texas ones just happen to be kind of in my backyard. And if someone's willing to go into your backyard and kill your horse, they're willing to kill you if you confront them. You know?
Yeah, that's
And
they're
but there was
deranged,
another
yeah.
one in Port Arthur, which is right by me. A guy owned a feed store, and someone came up and stabbed his horse. And that's how the horses were killed in Pearland. They were killed by stabbing.
Did they catch? They didn't catch that guy?
None of them. Interestingly, there's a guy captured in Oklahoma who killed horses and had some kind of other thing, and he was captured. And right now there aren't any of these in our area. I'm kind of wondering if it might be the guy, but just weird stuff. I mean, just
Weird.
like
Super
it's
weird.
kind of, and it's so. I've learned this about like the agricultural outdoor. A lot of people don't report stuff to the authorities because we had 2 little horses that we use in our ministry outreach for kids. They don't stay at my property, they stay at a friend's property. We never show them on social media, etc. The guy writing about the horse killings might not want to put the horse location out, right?
Right.
And we took this. We have a foster group home and brought some kids to come see us. And we're talking about. I said, I got to kind of keep the horses on the radar. She goes, yeah, man, we have all those horse killings. She goes, they killed my horse. And she was in Newton, and someone had come and killed her horse.
What do you make of it? That's so
You know,
crazy.
I think there are at least 2 different things going on. Obviously, there's a market for horse meat. Middle Eastern people and certain European countries, that's a pretty regular menu item.
I knew
and
about
parts-
Italy. That's the only country I've ever heard.
It was, like some of the Middle Eastern countries and different European countries. So in my mind, there's someone with money that wants horse meat, but the thing that spooks me is the ones they were harvesting for the meat, because you got the ones that were left to lay with the little girls that ride. So
Yeah.
left to lay, shot and left. And you got the horse meat harvesting. 2 different things, 2 different people or groups. But the one, I can't figure out why they don't just go on a vacant landowner's property if they're going to do it and shoot a horse there and have 20 times less chance of getting caught.
Right.
So to me, that's almost like someone has some kind of weird fetish about eating someone's pet or the risk of it. They like the risk of it. The killer likes the risk of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, is it possible someone drove down the road and said, I want to eat those horses? I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a cult tie-in. That's highly possible. But it's just one of those things going down this journey you run into, and it flies under the media. The media talked about the horse killings to a certain extent, but it kind of don't make connections. So sometimes I go out there and connect dots, man.
This is the first I've heard of it. Yeah. Just getting back to the regional weirdness and the disappeared people. Roughly, how many people are we talking about? Just like,
well, so I know this much: the East Texas, the missing Texas 40 turned into the missing Texas 60, and then there's a new group I just joined on Facebook called the Missing East Texas 8 and Beyond on the other side of East Texas, like where I'm at. You have on the I-45 corridor along in Liberty, San Jacinto, Montgomery County, and these other ones are up in like Center and all that area up Lake Caddo, all that up there. And so there's quite a few missing people, and they're all over the map on profiles. But there are a lot of women. There are a fair amount of special needs people, which is interesting as well.
Yeah.
And it's not just the missing people. There's a lot of John Does and Jane Does too, that are out there. And so strange stuff going on. And people in East Texas are very clannish. I was told that by a guy that had a business in East Texas. He said it's very clannish. Like, I take care of my little clan of people here, my little group, or somebody might say tribal in a way. My tribe, and you guys kind of leave each other alone. So there's not a lot of communication sometimes, especially on older generation of what's going on. And there's some weird stuff, obviously drug stuff, obviously trafficking stuff at some level. I believe there's definitely dark occult stuff. I know there's dark occult stuff going on.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Do you think is there an occult tie-in, and have you ever stumbled across any ritual sites, things like that?
Here we go. Yes, and yes. Okay. I got to be careful how I say some of this stuff, because a couple of things I'm able to share, I just was told I can't share in any way that would reflect who told me. Does that make any sense? Like, you can share the story, but protect basic locations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There are definitely dark occult things. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life.
Okay.
When I was in school, I ran into a spot one time where I saw remnants of activity, okay, or something had happened. Not like, candles and, stuff like that. You knew what happened. And the local newspaper ran quite a bit of stuff about what the sheriff's department was finding. And I was told by a sheriff's department guy, and this is when I was a senior in high school, I was actually doing a project with them for journalism, that there was definitely a lot of that activity out there. And we heard a story. This will actually be on a future Darker Outdoors episode, of a guy that we all knew from school who's a few years older than us. And he was openly into Satanism. Like, he talked about it. Like, they called me a Satanist all the time because I was a metalhead. Long-haired metalhead guy, and I've been a Jesus follower, not a follower, but a believer my whole life. And I was the last thing from a Satanist. But so when somebody told me that about it, I was like, hold on a second, bro. They call me that.
Right.
They go, no, he talks about it. And I actually read his senior paper, which was about his faith in Satanism. He wrote about it. So I knew this guy, that part where it was true. That some of the guys we knew heard him over talking about a big meeting at this location, and they were going to go out, being the rednecks that they were, and get some beer in the bayou and hide in the bushes with some shotguns and 22s and watch. And they did. And the story was a bunch of people came. Around 11:30, people started filtering in, and they could see and they could hear them talk some. They would hear like a name, and then they said everybody was in black but one in red, and the one in red was talking. They could make that out. They would hear a name and a few words, and they heard this guy's name clearly because they knew the name. And he said, huh? I remember that part, that detail. And he see somebody take off running. Well, this guy lived like 3 blocks from this location. Probably how he got drawn in, Mm-hmm. So they went and knocked at his door the next day. And he had bandages right here and right here. He used to have a pentagram and an upside down cross about that big, little tiny little homemade tattoos. He had shaved them off with a razor blade and said that they had called out for a sacrifice.
And his name got called.
I can verify this. I can verify he was into Satanism. I can verify his location. I can verify that at that time the sheriff's department put in the newspaper that location had activity, and that the guy, I ended up knowing him slightly from work I'd done in a band later on and later in life, and those tattoos weren't there anymore. And so that was in one of these areas I'm talking about, like where it's like just off the city,
Yeah.
And there have been other people run into some pretty crazy stuff out there in dark areas. I mean, William Ramsey has even talked about there being some kind of potential link, maybe to smiley face killer stuff. I do believe there's all kind of occult activity. You got your girls who just watched The Craft for the first time or something, and they don't like the Christians to pick on them at school, so they go buy the Wicca book at the mall, right?
Right.
You got the undergrounders who really know what they're doing, and have been doing some pretty raunchy stuff for a long time. And you got like more organized type groups out there. But we know for a fact along the border, like in Matamoros in Mexico, that there were 20, 25 years ago, there were these students from Texas went over the border and they were all killed in a ritual. There's a lot of that kind of, there's more of that than people want to admit. And I have found weird symbols before a couple times in the woods, but everything I've ran into was like something I ran into like in these areas by me where like the police at that time were talking about it. I've never ran into like some big ritual somewhere. But I talked to someone the other day who's told me a relative of theirs ran into something up in East Texas where they were actually chased away by someone in a ritual standing by fires at night in the woods,
Yeah.
So stuff but you got to think about like secret society level stuff. I mean, if you go back in East Texas history, I mean, the Ku Klux Klan,
Yeah.
they were here operating in Orange County. I remember seeing them. I mean, one of me and my wife's first dates were driving over through Vidor on the interstate, and I look over and I think the woods are on fire because it looks like the woods, what the heck is that? When we get on the overpass, it's about 10-foot tall, upside down cross burning and some Klansmen.
It's upside down?
No, not upside down. I'm sorry, 10-foot tall cross burning and
Okay.
Klansmen. And they were like probably 50 of them. And it was in a public site off the interstate. But if people are engaged in that level of like hate, whether you're a white dude or a black dude stumbles up on them, they probably just as be glad to throw a white guy with long hair on a rope. You know what I mean? And I think, thank God, a lot of that stuff's faded away. But I think I don't think the dark occult stuff is everywhere out there, but I think there is an element of that for sure out there. I'm not someone that thinks behind every bush. I don't think it's behind every crime. Yeah. But I think that it is definitely a guiding thing in some of these things.
I'm one of those who because of my belief, and you're a Christian also, I know.
Yep.
It's easy for me, and maybe it's immature for me to do that, but I make a spiritual association.
No, I do too.
I think that the demonic influences.
Now, that's a different topic. I think the demonic influences serial killers and everything else. But what I'm thinking about like organized occult groups, to me that's like a different level of it, the ground troops, so to speak. And I think they're out, there for sure. And like I said, I had a couple of these little run-ins that I knew of stuff that happened, But, look, if you're going to go down that rabbit hole, here's a thought for you. Okay. Demons, right? Demonic beings. I mean, Jesus cast 6,000 of them out of the demoniac of Gadara. As I said, Legion, Legion was 6,000 at that time. And we know there was at least 3,000 because he cast them into 3,000 pigs, right?
Yeah.
And this man was cutting himself and all this stuff. And my master here says, no more, And he takes authority over them. But talking about driving people, because there are some links between some serial killers out there, and you kind of wonder if it's the same demon.
That's exactly what I was thinking earlier. You have these patterns.
Yeah, is it the
similar
same
patterns
demon that's driving the same person decades later, a different person decades later?
There was a Denzel Washington movie that had a similar theme. Do you remember that?
Huh.
Where it's like a guy, I can't remember the name of it, but it was good acting. And
Denzel Washington, all his stuff's good.
And he was the cop, and then there's a serial killer, and that there was like that Rolling Stones, "Time Is on My Side" was like throughout the movie. I don't know what that had to do with it, but the demon would basically hop from person to person, like through touch or whatever. I don't think it was very realistic in terms of how demons are able
theology
to,
and stuff. Whatever. But I'm gonna look it up. That'll be interesting. But I've always thought that's a possibility. And here's another thing I thought with some of these killers. I think it's possible the demons give them the supernatural intelligence to stay away from law enforcement officials.
Oh man, yeah. So
think about this. So familiar spirits, like when someone goes to like a fortune teller and stuff like that, these people are operating under familiar spirits unless they're just a con man, and they think they're getting whatever, but there's a spirit telling them stuff that they can know and pick up in the environment. How come I couldn't tell some of these people stuff to avoid this, don't do this, go that direction. They think it's their thoughts. Because look, you're not going to be raping and mutilating people without some kind of like demonic, evil, whatever. And there's a whole thing somebody with Bundy where it talked about that he would change and stuff like that. My first Dark Outdoors was a Ted Bundy show, actually, because he actually.
I listened to that one. Yeah.
There's a line in there that gives me chills to this day when I ask about, I do fly fishing in the backcountry. If I confronted Ted, if he were back in the day and I was there, he said, "I run from you." He goes, "But if you're a woman, you couldn't resist it. You probably already fantasized about it, and like that gives me chills to think about ladies out there. But on this demonic part, I mean, a guy like that, or Jeffrey Dahmer had an altar in his house. In his home. I don't know if you know who Russ Dizdar was.
Yeah, I know the name.
Yeah, so he did a lot of research on like satanic ritual abuse stuff, and he saw, and it's all part of public knowledge now, but like Dahmer had like an altar in his home. I mean, and so I think there's definitely on some of these people an element of that, and but I think it's more, organized maybe with some, but I think more line it's just demonic activity for whatever reason. And it's real. We have a ministry. I have a ministry. This is like my pastor buddy called me a unicorn. He said, "You were in like a metal band for 18 years. You never smoked a cigarette, never got drunk, never did drugs, and you are a believer who still listens." Yes, I just leave me alone. I said, and so we deal sometimes with stuff that happens. We work with kids that got through special challenges. It might be whatever, and I've had to deal a couple of times with demonic stuff, and I wouldn't like signing up. I did sign up for it, or sign to be a follower of Jesus, but I didn't like think, "Yeah, let's go do this today." I wasn't like, but it came up a couple of different times, and one of them was a girl at an event and at a church, and come to pick up her sister, and she was standing there snarling, and I'll never forget this. And we have a young lady in our life named Demi, who's like, we call her our spiritual daughter. She's like a girl we mentored for years, And the young girl running the youth group, "Demi, come help." Demi goes, "I'm going to follow Chester." And I'm like, "Hey, boy." I grabbed Demi saying, "You start praying, sis, because I've seen The Exorcist, and that wasn't pretty, And I'm really hoping that the crowd isn't gathering, but the crowd gathered at this point. And I'm like, oh, man, number one, I don't want this to get ugly and someone get hurt. Number two, I don't want whatever this young lady's got going on in her life, I didn't want someone to like the whole world to have a view of it. I wanted to have decency and privacy, And so I probably broke deliverance protocol 101 because I went up to her and asked her name, and she wouldn't tell. And so I grabbed her hands and I got down on my knees and looked at her in the face like this. It's pretty short. I said, "I want you to tell me your name." And she told me her name. And I just said really softly, "In the name of Jesus of Nazareth, you come out of her." And she turned, her head fell back like this. The crowd goes, "Oh my God, her eyes." And her head came back down and her eyes weren't dark. They were normal now. And she was crying. And she had peace. 5 minutes later, she accepted Jesus Christ as her Lord and Savior,
Wow.
But it was in a real life situation, I didn't ever think, "Oh, I'm going to be dealing with that." But that happened, it happens in real life. So you think about the magnification of something like that on someone. This was just a young girl that probably had some kind of doorway open in her life. She didn't even realize. Can you imagine someone at a level of the evil that Bundy or Dahmer or Richard Ramirez, they were going in their own mind? Holy smokes,
Yeah. Well, in the case of Ramirez and Dahmer, they both kind of, Ramirez, he stayed the course with his Satanism, and then
yeah, but he did, a bad choice. He was that he to me was one of the scarier ones. Like he was like on a rampage. Like, there was no waiting around, there was no dry season for him. He just went from killing to killing to killing,
Yeah.
But I love the fact that the community caught him.
Yeah, that's great.
It was like Frankenstein. They were chasing him up the freaking, up to the thing with the pitchforks,
It was like that. That is a perfect description.
Because he came back from a trip to Arizona on like a bus, And he was on the front of the LA Times, which back then everybody read. And they're like, literally people looking at the LA Times, and he walks past them in the bus station,
Yep. You like to think that would happen today. You just don't know.
I'd love it. I would,
Yeah.
just like some justice on some. But I think what's happened is, and I think this ties into some of the dark outdoor stuff, we have so much knowledge about all this. People can retro create their stuff. People can watch and see what cops do and investigators do to try to get away with stuff. They can like I did a thing about cattle mutilations and in East Texas, which is Montgomery County, by the way. In Montgomery County, that's where Sam Houston National Forest, part of that is. And I can't believe that they asked for information on cattle mutilations and not knowing what was about to happen to them. Every UFO researcher on the planet was about to call them, and they finally didn't even answer emails or phone calls or anything, right? But I said, me and Jeff Stewart, a friend of mine, did a show about it. I said, hey, I don't know what that stuff is. Not my specialty, but there's so much information about that stuff. I think it's possible someone could go retro create that to make that now, because they know what to look for, what all the signs for. Same thing with some of these killers. Like they can go, and now they know a lot more what to be cautious of, and it probably makes them harder to catch. That there's a guy named Rex Huerman right now that is in jail for, probably he is the Long Island serial killer. Probably he's innocent of proven guilty, but if you saw the evidence of this guy, it's unbelievable. And they found a list of all his stuff that he made. He was refining his killing art in a list, putting all these things, the items he needed to bring every time to make it more impactful, more quote enjoyable for him, and to make him get away with it. So, I think that's some of the stuff scary out there. That's why I tell people you can go on the outdoors, pray, prepare, and pack heat. That's my dark outdoor slogan.
Yeah, I like that. I I have three small kids, and I was just mountain biking with my 6-year-old down in Sugar Land. They have a
man.
pretty nice trail system along the Brazos there. But it just you're kind of out. You're close to a big city,
Sure.
but
I tell
you're
people not to operate in fear, but use sense. Like just use
Yeah.
common. I tell people, especially if you're a Christ follower, if you feel like you shouldn't go, don't go. It's probably the Holy Spirit going, "Hey, knucklehead, there's a danger there. I don't want you there."
yeah
If you're just someone who maybe doesn't have a faith or whatever, you have a gut feeling, go with it. Don't go. Don't be Billy Badass and think everything's going to be okay. Just don't go. I've got places I don't go. I don't fish anymore, several places because of criminal elements, just because I want to go home and see my family again, And
Right.
most places are fine. You're going to be okay. You just got to go out there with the attitude, I'm going to be aware, I'm going to be present, and I'm going to watch out for what's going on. And I'm going to come back. They might not come back. I'm coming back. And it's funny because people are so in our culture is so we can't offend anyone, I spoke at an event, and it was an event that wasn't my normal outdoors type crowd, and it was all kind of people around the nation. I'm like, somebody said, well, what do you recommend for defending yourself against, attackers in the woods? I said, prayer, a 357 Magnum, if you can carry it. And you see people going, oh my God. And I don't want to ever have to do that.
Yeah.
This is between some demonic Bundy, Richard Ramirez type guy and me seeing my family again.
yeah
I'm going to tell you how that's going to turn out, and it ain't going to be good for them. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. It's our right. It's our duty to defend ourselves.
Exactly. And who wouldn't? I mean, in all honesty, if your family's being threatened. But I think most of this is avoidable. That's kind of what my dark outdoors avoid. You can just look at situations. One of the things I tell people to do is park. If you're on these roads stuff, I go on the dirt roads all the time. Park in the direction you got to retreat.
Mm-hmm.
That's from slasher movies in the 80s. They back up
Yeah.
and Jason would come get them out of the car, man. So,
Yeah.
park in a direction. I heard someone speaking in Oklahoma a few weeks ago. I was speaking up there, and they were saying the same thing. I'm like, also add strategic parking. If you're going to hiking trail or something, try to park like that, like you're going to leave, but also in a way you can't be blocked in, or you can see from 50 to 100 yards away and come up. Because if someone's going to nail you, it's probably going to be around that car.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They
just common sense stuff, and go have a good time. Enjoy amazing creation out there. But do realize, as I say on the show, sometimes the outdoor experience does go dark.
me and my 13-year-old have been talking about waiting for the weather to kind of calm down. It's too hot here, Houston, but
Oh yeah, man.
it's starting to get bearable. So we're planning our camping trip, and
Sweet.
we're looking, Sam Houston National Forest. It's the closest one, but I took it off the list.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah,
Smart man. Smart man. And I normally don't put that much fear mongering, but I've talked to too many people. That's
yeah.
one I just avoid with family. Plenty of people go, but there are other places. Say a good place to go you might want to look into is like around Village Creek State Park, Beaumont area. Pretty nice area.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I haven't really
And
been over there much.
yeah, some of these areas like that. So, enjoy that awesome time with the family, man.
Yeah, I will. Hey, Chester, it's been great. One more question.
Yeah, what you got?
Any Bigfoot sightings?
Any Bigfoot stuff. So I got to leave with the Bigfoot. By the way, I just released a Bigfoot YouTube channel called Global Bigfoot. So
Oh,
go
rad.
subscribe. It's a
Global
Global
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. Unfortunately, there's a glitch in YouTube right now where it's saying that you don't have any content. I do. Just click on the videos link. There's 3 videos up. There'll be another one Wednesday. And the only Bigfoot stuff I do is I take kids that we have a program that grants wildlife encounters for kids who have a terminal illness, parental loss. We bring, kids in foster. We've granted 253 wildlife wishes for kids over the last 10 years.
It's
And
amazing. Wow.
and we've had a lot of Bigfoot questions about a Bigfoot expedition. So I do that, but I also talk about old reports and stuff like that as well. And I will leave you with one that is from my past that is on a video on the Global Bigfoot channel.
Perfect.
So back when I was about 10 years old, me and my dad and my aunt and uncle were rabbit hunting on my other aunt's property in Newton County, Texas. And the way we would do this, we would start on one piece of the fence line. It's 83 acres. And then we would walk and meet down at like the creek bottom and cover the whole fence line, And this night we kind of were meeting down in that area, and then we heard this thing. And I can't, I'm pretty good at doing like weird noises, but I can't do this. It's a whole different level. But it's kind of like, I mean, it's unbelievable. If you go hear the Sierra sounds from Ron Moorhead, it's not the chatter, but there's some guttural grunts, growls. It's very similar. And we're looking, and my uncle, who's a Nam vet in the Marines, 68, 69, is leaving, walking out calmly. My dad was in the Army, walking out calmly. And I'm like, hey, Dad, what is that? He goes, I think that's one of Uncle Bill's bulls got hung up in the fence down there. And I'm like, well, why don't we go help it? He goes, no, he'll get out. He'll be okay. He was trying to convince me this, so we got out of the woods at night. And, little budding journalist in me was like, Dad, what is that? And it might be a bear. So to me, it might have been a bear, because bears sometimes come over at the time from Louisiana where there's still populations across the border. Possible. I got to work around bears when I was in college and realized that wasn't a bear. Fast forward to the first Bigfoot investigation I think I ever did with Bobby Hamilton from the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. We're in Polk County, Texas, near near Livingston area. And we're leaving a campsite at night, and the exact same sound echoes from the forest. My dad's with me. He looks over and says, that's what we heard 20 years ago at Ann's. And it got louder and louder and more intense. And I had just been in Venezuela 8 months earlier fishing and was messing with howler monkeys. And it sounded a lot like a howler monkey, but more like a howler monkey with like early Arnold Schwarzenegger volumes of steroids, like huge. And I'll leave it at that. But a lot of vocalization stuff going on out there. And I thought that was, there's a video on that at Global Bigfoot. So also, if you know of a kid that might be facing a special challenge or going through some serious bad stuff in life that loves wildlife, reach out to me. We will love to do something special for them. You can email me at chester@chestermore.com or hit me at @thechestermore like you did on Instagram. And we'd love to do something special. If they want a Bigfoot encounter, I can't produce a Bigfoot encounter. I can take them on an expedition. Can't. That's the thing. Kids will be like, are we going to see a Bigfoot? Like, dude, I don't have a real high ratio of that, but we can go into a really good area. It's got legitimate reports and do legitimate research with thermal imaging and night vision and stuff like that. So if there's a kid that's going through any bad challenge that we can help like that, let us know. That's really the joy of our heart right there.
That's wonderful. That was fantastic. Thank you, Chester.
Well, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, it's been great to meet you, and thank you again for your time and those stories. And good luck with all your endeavors. Looking forward to seeing what you do in 2025.
Me too.
All right,
Fun.
man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool.
It's dinner time.